The opulent Hawthorne ballroom froze at 10 o'clock sharp. CEO Alexandra Hawthorne, pale and trembling, heard her uncle's announcement. The family council has voted to immediately divest Alexandra of all executive power. Stunned, Alexandra stumbled, but a powerful arm shot out, steadying her. It was Daniel Cross, single dad, former Navy SEAL, her personal security detail, hired just this morning. A furious relative lunged forward, barking, "Stay out of this, bodyguard! This is strictly family business." Daniel met his eyes, his voice a low, dangerous rumble that cut the air. "Try me." Silence descended. Alexandra Hawthorne, at 30, was the fiercely intelligent CEO of the Hawthorne Group, a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate built by her grandfather. She ran the empire despite the constant, palpable skepticism from her entire extended family. Internally, her relatives viewed her as a temporary placeholder, waiting for a more deserving man to take the reins. Alexandra was objectively brilliant, a financial prodigy, and utterly dedicated. Yet the deep-seated patriarchy of the Hawthorne dynasty demanded her replacement. This constant pressure had carved deep lines of fatigue around her eyes, hidden skillfully beneath flawless makeup. She hadn't trusted anyone in her inner circle since her father, the former CEO, had died unexpectedly, leaving her in command. Past friendships had dissolved the moment the crown was placed on her head. Everyone she knew seemed to be angling for a piece of the group. Her mother, who quickly remarried outside the family, offered no support, prioritizing her new life over Alexandra's corporate battle. The truth was, Alexandra was deeply isolated within her own gilded cage, lonely in the sprawling family mansion. The corporate world saw a brilliant, unshakable leader, the Ice Queen, who never showed weakness. But inside, Alexandra felt hollow and constantly under siege. She had hired Daniel Cross, 38, just that morning. She'd subjected him to a grueling interview, testing his boundaries, trying to find the cracks she assumed existed in all men, especially those who offered their loyalty for a price. His resume was starkly impressive. 10 years as a decorated Navy SEAL, followed by a quiet, reliable career in private security. Alexandra's instinct told her she needed protection. In the last 3 months, the anonymous threats had escalated from veiled warnings to clear, detailed descriptions of her routines, indicating an internal source. She needed a shield, not a friend. Daniel's reasons for taking the job were brutally simple: money and the immediate need for it. He was a devoted single father to his 6-year-old daughter, Emma, who was his absolute world. Since his wife's death 3 years prior in a routine traffic accident, a loss that still felt like a piece of shrapnel embedded in his soul, Daniel had struggled, taking whatever high-paying, high-risk security contracts he could find. This particular CEO detail offered a substantial, life-changing salary, enough to cover the expensive, specialized corneal transplant surgery Emma desperately needed within the next 6 weeks. Without it, Emma's vision would continue to deteriorate. Daniel accepted the contract, fully prepared for a demanding but routine job focused on perimeter defense and vehicular escort. He had no idea he was stepping directly into the middle of a corporate war zone disguised as a family party, or that his first 24 hours would test his moral code against his paycheck. The moment Daniel saw Alexandra's face, pale, terrified, genuinely alone, something in his rigid SEAL training snapped. His mission shifted immediately from contract fulfillment to immediate hazard mitigation. It was no longer about a paycheck. It was about protecting a vulnerable target under overwhelming hostile fire. He had been explicitly instructed by the Hawthorne Council's security liaison to wait outside during the family meeting, as his presence was unnecessary and disruptive. But when her uncle, Marcus, delivered the verdict and Alexandra nearly collapsed, Daniel abandoned his post without a second thought. The sheer predatory hunger in the room was unacceptable. He surged forward through the stunned crowd, his body reacting faster than his brain, reaching her side in 2 powerful strides. As his arm wrapped around her, stabilizing her, Alexandra's composure failed completely. Her guard was completely down, revealing the deep trauma of betrayal. They are my family," she whispered, the words choked with disbelief and pain, clinging to the last vestiges of hope for loyalty. Daniel's grip tightened slightly, his gaze sweeping over the cold faces surrounding them. "Family doesn't tear you down like this," he replied, his voice barely audible to her alone, a raw statement drawn from his own past loss and disappointment. The room erupted into chaos. Relatives shouted, accusing Alexandra of financial incompetence, emotional weakness, and insufficient leadership to run the Hawthorne group. Daniel remained motionless, a solid steel barrier at her side. He wasn't armed with words, he was armed with conviction. When the aggressive, entitled relative challenged him directly, Daniel's two-word reply, "Try me," was the ultimate manifestation of his SEAL training. Calm, concise, and utterly lethal. The silence that followed was proof of his inherent authority, a presence that commanded respect more than their inherited wealth ever could. As Alexandra slowly moved off the stage, Daniel gently placed his hand at the small of her back. The touch was non-sexual, purely grounding, a steady anchor. It was a small, protective gesture, but for Alexandra, who hadn't felt genuine human support in years, it nearly broke her. She swallowed hard, gripping his arm tightly, realizing that the one person who wasn't family was the only one standing with her. The family coup intensified rapidly. The Hawthorne elders immediately cornered Alexandra, demanding she sign a resignation and forfeiture document right there in the ballroom. She tried to maintain her icy composure, but the pen trembled violently in her hand, betraying her fear. Daniel stood guard, his back to the room, his eyes constantly scanning the relatives. He recognized the pattern. This wasn't negotiation. It was a psychological ambush designed to overload her senses and break her resistance instantly. He registered the subtle blocking movements of her cousins, the position of the heavy marble table, and the nearest exits, all data points for a potential exfiltration. Uncle Marcus, the ringleader, leaned in, his voice dangerously low, dripping with false concern. "Sign it, Alexandra. It's for the good of the group. If you don't, tomorrow we will leak evidence of your alleged embezzlement of the Cayman Subsidiary Fund. It will destroy your career and put you in prison. Think of the shame." Alexandra gasped, recoiling from the monstrous fabricated accusation. She knew the documents were false, fabricated, and malicious, but the threat was terrifyingly real. A younger cousin, an Ivy League lawyer named Bryce, who was Marcus's clear replacement, stepped forward, adding a calculated, cruel blow. "You've always been too sensitive for this, Alexandra. You let your emotions cloud your judgment. You're lucky we're offering you a clean exit." Daniel moved instantly. He stepped around Alexandra, placing himself squarely between her and Marcus. His voice was a flat, lethal monotone, disrupting Bryce's practiced smugness. "Sir, such an accusation is criminal libel and requires verifiable evidence. I suggest you consult your counsel immediately, not resort to boardroom threats." Marcus's face darkened, his composure cracking under the direct challenge. "You are security staff, a hired hand. You have no standing here. Shut your mouth and step back." Daniel remained unmoving, his presence dominating the space. "I am mandated to protect the legally appointed CEO from immediate physical and psychological duress. Your harassment constitutes a direct threat to my client." The surrounding relatives exploded in outrage, shouting insults at Daniel. "Oversized thug! Uneducated brute! Low-class employee interfering in executive matters!" Alexandra looked around frantically. Not a single person, not her mother, not her cousins, spoke up in her defense. The silence from her mother was the sharpest stab of all. Daniel leaned down, his voice soft, cutting through the noise like a scalpel. "Do you want me to extract you now, ma'am? We can leave. They can chase the paper." Alexandra shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes, her resolve flickering. "No, I have to fight this. But I don't know where to start. They have locked the data servers." She looked overwhelmed, defeated by the sheer number of hostile faces. Daniel straightened up, his eyes sweeping across the hostile faces, calculating the potential risk of a physical altercation. He drew a deep breath and spoke, his voice carrying clearly and deliberately over the family's din. echoing his days directing high-risk extraction missions in volatile zones. "Attention!" he commanded. The volume and raw force of his voice, combined with the military precision, instantly stunned the room into a brief, fragile silence. He pointed directly at the circle of shouting relatives. "Anyone who approaches or further threatens Ms. Hawthorne, you go through me first. Your personal safety ends at the edge of this table." His meaning was utterly clear. Physical harm was an option he was ready for. Several male relatives, emboldened by their numbers and believing Daniel was just a glorified bouncer, started moving towards him, intending to physically drag him away. Daniel did not flinch. He slightly lowered his center of gravity, a barely perceptible shift, but one that signaled lethal readiness. His intense practice seal gaze, the look of a man prepared to engage in close-quarters combat, hit them with an undeniable nonverbal warning. "Don't try me," Daniel repeated, the words separate and final. The men froze. They were intimidated not by his size, but by the deadly, contained resolve in his eyes. They recognized a different kind of authority, one earned in blood, not inherited through lineage. Alexandra watched him, a slow realization dawning. He wasn't just doing his job, he was being her protection, standing against an overwhelming threat with absolute certainty. As Alexandra finally managed to step away from the table, Daniel's entire massive frame shifted, completely obscuring her from the hostile crowd. He was a fortress of muscle and bone. Alexandra leaned heavily against him, her own strength momentarily gone. She realized he was risking his brand new, lucrative career, the very means to save his daughter's sight. For her, a cold stranger he had only met hours ago. She gripped his arm, her knuckles white, her voice raw with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for not abandoning me like them." Daniel simply gave a barely perceptible nod, his eyes still fixed on the enemy, his entire being focused on her protection. He was her last line of defense, and for the first time, she felt safe. After the confrontation, Daniel escorted Alexandra out of the hostile environment, navigating the stunned silence of the remaining guests. He drove her back to her luxurious penthouse apartment overlooking the entire city. The moment the steel door shut behind them, Alexandra collapsed onto a plush velvet sofa. The mask she wore for the world shattered, and silent tears streamed down her face, raw, private grief she had never allowed anyone to witness. Daniel did not offer empty cliches or reach for her. He stood a respectful distance away, leaning against the marble kitchen counter, a silent pillar of strength, an anchor she could rely on without pressure, waiting for her storm to pass. After a long, shuddering silence, Alexandra finally spoke, her voice hoarse. "I have nobody, Daniel. My security access has been revoked. My mother won't speak to me, and my uncle is trying to frame me. You should leave. You don't have to be involved in this madness." Daniel pulled up a low, contemporary leather chair and sat down, his posture relaxed yet ready, maintaining eye contact. "Emma doesn't have a mother, and I lost my own father young. I know what it feels like to lose the person who should be standing next to you." His simple, honest statement bypassed her wealth, her title, and her defenses, hitting her at her deepest vulnerability. Alexandra choked back a fresh wave of tears, recognizing the shared territory of loss. "I understand what it means to be truly alone. I'm staying until the job is done." He then picked up the fraudulent financial documents her uncle had threatened her with. Alexandra watched as the former SEAL, the brute the family had scorned, began analyzing the complex spreadsheets. He didn't use a calculator or a computer. He moved his finger methodically across the rows of numbers, his gaze narrow and focused. Within minutes, his gaze narrowed, tracing a series of irregular ledger movements. He wasn't looking at the big picture of fraud. He was looking for the tiny human errors in the forgery, the inconsistent dating, the slightly off-kilter subsidiary code. He found them. He identified a clear pattern of account manipulation and unauthorized transfers, not linked to Alexandra, but directly traceable to a specific, poorly disguised shell company controlled by Uncle Marcus. Alexandra was stunned, watching his almost preternatural ability to scan and process information. You, you can read and understand high finance? You're reading that balance sheet faster than my chief financial officer, she stammered. Daniel offered a small, rare, self-deprecating smile. He revealed his past. Before joining the SEALs, he had been a finance and data analyst, a scholarship student who worked his way through college before deciding the adrenaline and purpose of the military was a better fit for him. He left the service only when Emma's medical needs became too demanding for deployment. Double-checking data flows is just another form of tactical analysis, Ms. Hawthorne, he explained. It's about finding the pressure point. The biggest fraud always hides behind the smallest detail. Alexandra looked at him with entirely new eyes. No longer her hired security, but her brilliant, completely unexpected ally. This was the true twist. The former military man was the financial genius she actually needed. They underestimated you, Daniel. They underestimated us. We are done playing defense, Daniel declared, his voice firm, rising to meet her newly ignited determination. We counterattack. They spent the next few hours in a focused, almost clinical war room, using Daniel's analytical skills and Alexandra's knowledge of the company structure. They meticulously cross-referenced digital records from Alexandra's hidden backup drive and the hard copies Daniel had carefully collected. They built an irrefutable legal case against Marcus, detailing specific dates, wire transfers, and the money laundering mechanism. Alexandra's fighting spirit returned, sharpened by Daniel's tactical precision and cool logic. That evening, Emma, Daniel's daughter, video called him. Daniel excused himself, but, unable to fully leave the makeshift office, answered the call nearby. Alexandra, still reviewing the evidence, saw the soft, unguarded affection in his face as he talked to his daughter. Emma, seeing the stern, elegant woman in the background, innocently chirped, "Is that your friend, Daddy? She looks like a princess." Alexandra stepped into the frame, and a genuine, warm laugh escaped her. The first she had truly enjoyed in months. The sound was bright, unfamiliar, and startling even to her own ears. "Yes, Emma," she said. "Your daddy saved me today." Daniel flushed slightly, the CEO's warm smile a direct cause of his embarrassment. Alexandra realized, watching the tender exchange, that this was the kind of unconditional, pure love she had been starved of her entire life. It was a profound contrast to the cold, transactional power games of the Hawthorne Empire. The next morning, Alexandra and Daniel returned to the Hawthorne Group headquarters. She walked into the boardroom, absolutely composed, wearing her confidence like armor. Daniel was exactly one pace behind her, his intense eyes sweeping the room like a radar, ensuring no one could get close. Uncle Marcus jumped to his feet, enraged at her audacity. "You are still here? You dare challenge the council after all we have shown you?" Alexandra didn't respond to the bait. She calmly placed a new thick folder on the table, a folder marked Internal Audit Marcus Hawthorne. "I have evidence," she announced, her voice ringing with measured authority. "Evidence of your embezzlement, stretching back 3 years, using the shell company Phoenix Holdings to funnel funds from the Cayman subsidiary." The room erupted into chaos. Daniel immediately moved forward, placing his hand on the back of Alexandra's chair, his body language a warning. He stood as her shield as angry relatives, including a sputtering Marcus, lunged forward, yelling accusations. Alexandra pressed on, her eyes fixed on Marcus, showing no mercy. "The supporting data, including original bank transfers and witness statements from your CFO, have been submitted to my legal team and the federal authorities. It is you who will be stripped of all power, effective immediately, and you will be facing criminal charges." Her stepmother, who had watched the whole exchange with smug indifference, suddenly looked devastated, realizing her own security was now compromised by Marcus's downfall. Alexandra glanced at her mother, her expression softening momentarily, devoid of malice but filled with finality. "I truly only ever wanted your support, Mother, but I don't need it anymore. I found my own support." Daniel gently placed a hand on Alexandra's shoulder, a gesture of silent support that helped her hold her balance during the final, emotional delivery. The council, confronted by irrefutable facts, irrefutable data, and a unified front led by the genius former SEAL, quickly reversed its decision, confirming Alexandra as the sole CEO with a newfound, genuine respect. As they left the now silent room, Alexandra looked at Daniel, silent tears tracing paths down her cheeks, tears of victory, relief, and gratitude. "You didn't just protect me," she whispered. "You saved me." In the weeks following the coup, the atmosphere around Alexandra Hawthorne changed completely. The frostiness that had defined the Ice Queen began to thaw. She smiled easily, listened to her staff, and moved through her company no longer as an enemy, but as a leader who had stared down the darkness and won. She quickly found a legitimate reason to keep Daniel close, offering him an unprecedented role as head of strategic security analysis, a position that included high-level financial and consulting work. Daniel excelled, blending his tactical training with his forgotten financial acumen, proving invaluable to protecting the group's assets. But every day, promptly at 5 p.m., Daniel was gone to pick up Emma. Alexandra observed him constantly, realizing Daniel's true north was not his career, but his child. His unwavering, non-negotiable commitment defined him, making him more admirable than any ruthless business tycoon she knew. She witnessed a small, defining moment one afternoon. Emma was visiting, and Daniel was teaching her a simple hand signal for, "I need help." It was a tiny private act, a blend of his professional life and paternal duty, and Alexandra watched, completely captivated by his tender strength. Emma, too, had become a fixture in Alexandra's life. She started visiting the executive offices, her crayon drawings of stick figures and rainbows taped proudly to Daniel's new polished filing cabinet. Alexandra, in turn, kept every single one on her own desk, a stark contrast to the severe art that normally decorated her workspace. One quiet evening, Alexandra visited Daniel's small apartment, claiming she needed to review a classified document outside the office's watchful eye. The building was older, the carpet worn, but the scent of cinnamon and garlic from dinner hung warm in the air. She lingered, watching Daniel and Emma in their humble living room. The little girl laughing as Daniel helped her build a pillow fort, her face glowing. The scene was simple, warm, and entirely authentic. It was the home Alexandra's money had never been able to buy. Alexandra's composure slipped as she sat on the worn, comfortable sofa. "I've never seen anyone prioritize family the way you do," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion, looking at the faded photographs of his late wife. Daniel looked up, his expression serious, sitting beside her. "When you lose it all, Alexandra, you understand what actually matters. Nothing else is permanent. Not money, not power." He paused. "Your strength during that meeting, it was the same kind of focus I saw in combat. But you're exhausted from fighting alone." Alexandra sat down on the floor, her expensive suit contrasting sharply with the worn carpet. Her eyes were vulnerable, the defenses finally down. "I want someone to choose me, Daniel," she admitted softly. "Not because of the money or the power, not because I'm the CEO, but just for me, for the woman you saw falling on that stage." Daniel looked at her, truly seeing the lonely, powerful woman before him. The distance between the CEO and the bodyguard evaporated completely. "It's not the empire you're missing," he said gently, moving closer. "It's a connection. You have everything but a safe harbor, and that vulnerability, that's what made me stay." He reached out and softly cupped her cheek, his thumb tracing the faint line of tension near her eye. Alexandra closed her eyes, leaning into the simple, non-material contact. This small, protective gesture felt more valuable than her entire company. "I don't know how to build that," she whispered, a plea. Before Daniel could respond, Emma padded out of her room, having overheard the quiet conversation. The little girl skipped over and threw her small arms around both of them, her presence breaking the intense moment. "Ms. Alex, can you stay and have dinner with me and Daddy tonight?" Emma asked, her voice innocent and hopeful. Alexandra looked at Daniel, a warm, heartfelt smile blossoming on her face. She nodded immediately. "I'd love to, Emma. I'd really love to." As they moved toward the tiny kitchen, Alexandra felt a profound, peaceful sense of belonging. For the first time, she was exactly where she wanted to be, with people who saw her, not her title, and offered safety without expectation. A month later, Alexandra had successfully consolidated her power, and her uncle was facing an intense criminal investigation. Daniel was permanently appointed as the Chief of Strategic Security, a high-level executive position. Yet no title or salary increase changed his non-negotiable routine. He was always home by 5 to pick up Emma, often leaving the CEO's corporate jet waiting on the tarmac. Alexandra became a constant natural fixture in their weekends. She joined them for quiet dinners and helped Daniel bake terrible cookies with Emma, embracing the chaos of domestic life. The three of them had formed a quiet, unexpected domestic unit that felt more real than any family gathering Alexandra had ever attended. One Saturday afternoon, while they were watching a movie on the sofa, Emma looked up at Alexandra, her head resting on her lap. "Mrs. Alex, you like my daddy, don't you?" she asked directly. Alexandra blushed scarlet, caught completely off guard. Daniel, sitting next to her, quickly looked away, trying to hide his own rising color. Alexandra took Emma's hand and answered honestly, her gaze meeting Daniel's for a moment. "I like both of you very much," she said sincerely, "more than anything I have ever had." Later, after Emma had gone to bed, Alexandra stood at the door, watching Daniel clean up the remnants of the movie night. "You protected me when the entire world was against me," she began, her voice low and filled with emotion. I can offer you the world, Daniel. Security, money, power." Daniel put down the mug he was holding and stepped closer, closing the distance between them. He took her hands, his gaze warm and steady. "I chose you, Alexandra," he said simply. "Not because of the job, not because of your company, and not for the world. I chose you because of who you are when all of that is stripped away. The woman who still fought when she had nothing left." Tears streamed down Alexandra's face, but this time they were of profound relief and acceptance. She rested her head against his chest, feeling the solid, steady beat of his heart, her safe harbor. "For the first time," she whispered, "I don't feel like I'm fighting alone anymore." The final image was of the three of them nestled on the small sofa. Emma, asleep between them, was the perfect bridge. Alexandra leaned her head on Daniel's shoulder, looking out at the glittering city lights, her empire, from the safety of his small, warm apartment. No more words were necessary. They had found home. A former SEAL who had lost everything. A powerful CEO who had stood alone against the world. They found each other, not in perfect stability, but in shared, honest brokenness, building a future brick by simple, loving brick. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to NL Touching Stories.